Well, I do apologize if you're watching online and there is a bit of a glare. We are going to be fixing that, Lord willing, in the next few weeks. Probably not next week. We have to, when the blackening for the windows come in, the sun won't be there to know which window. So we're going to have to test that out next Wednesday night, hopefully, the Lord willing, and figure out which window is the cause. I have 3 candidates, and it may be all of them. For all I know, it's causing that glare across the screen. In the winter, it's not too bad, but in the summer, we're getting the glare across the window, and it's only going to get worse until mid-June, and then into the summer. So if we want to use this, we're going to have to blacken those windows a little bit. This evening, we are in Acts chapter 27. We are in the last 2 chapters. These 2 chapters we won't be going through them very slow, is because it's a narrative. There's not too much doctrine taught here, even though there is some verses we'll go and read besides Acts 27, but it's going to detail Paul's trip to Rome. Remember, he has appealed to Caesar, and Festus and Agrippa last week in Acts 26, we heard that they heard from Paul. Agrippa said, "You've almost persuaded me to be a Christian," but he didn't persuade him completely. And Festus basically said, "Well, we don't have a charge for him, but since he's appealed to Caesar, we can't let him go." And so Paul is going to depart. So we're going to read verses 1 through 5 to begin. We'll read 2 verses each. We'll start with Henry and go to Bill and around. It's on the board if you want it. Acts 25, verses 1 through 5.
1 verse each?
2 verses each.
When it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to our centurion of Augustine, Colbert, named Julius, and embarking in the ship of Philemon, which was about to sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus and Macedonia from Thessalonica.
The next day we put in at Sidon. Julius treated Paul kindly and gave him leave to go to his friends and be cared for. And putting out to sea, from there we sailed under the lee of Cyprus, because the winds were against us.
And when we had sailed over the sea, which is off Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia.
Okay, so we have our map now describing where Paul started. Remember, he started down here in Jerusalem, and he was up in Caesarea when to leave the Judean region. And you can't get anywhere from Jerusalem. He was in Caesarea, then he went up to Sidon. That city still exists today. That's in Lebanon. Went up to Sidon. He'd catch a ship there. Now, they usually, you would think, would come around, and it said, actually, this map I think is wrong. It said they went underneath Cyprus, didn't they? They went under Cyprus. I think this map is wrong on that.
Well, mine says under the shelter of Cyprus. So maybe they were used because of the winds. So they maybe. That's probably.
King James doesn't make it. King James doesn't make it very clear as to whether or not under means down here, or as your version says, under the shelter of, because of the winds. It would make sense if you think about it. Between Turkey and Cyprus, you might have some more protection of the winds. But anyway, they passed Cyprus and they came to this city in Asia, Myra, and we will take up where they're going after that. But they are sailing towards Rome. In the ship, what's the ship called? Sorry for the name, but what's the ship called? Adramyttium. That's the ship. In a ship out of Adramyttium, that's the place. It's a ship out of Adramyttium in a city in Asia Minor. But they sailed towards Turkey. Who was with them? Besides Paul and Julius, who's the captain? Aristarchus. We've met this man before. He is mentioned in a few of Paul's writings, and he's also mentioned in the book of Acts as accompanying Paul to Jerusalem. Acts 19, verse 29, Henry, and Acts 20, verse 4, we'll give to Bill. Acts 19, verse 29, it's on the board too.
So our city was filled with the confusing and the rushing together into the city, dragging within Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonian, who were false companies in trouble.
So, we have this Aristarchus, the Macedonian here. So, we've met him before. Acts 20 and verse 4.
And it's Sopater of Berea accompanied him to Asia. Also, Ardicus and Secundus of the Thessalonians, and Gaius of Derbe, and Timothy, and Tychicus, and Trophimus of Asia.
Okay, here's Aristarchus again. I do not know whether this means Aristarchus was imprisoned as well, or whether he was accompanying Paul on the trip to Rome. He had obviously been with Paul when he came to Jerusalem all the way back in Acts chapter 21. Because this is the trip that they're coming to. I doubt he was in prison. We do not have any record of him being in prison in these books. But he's accompanying Paul to Rome from here. And in fact, in other places, he is going to be mentioned as being with Paul in Rome. In Colossians chapter 4, Tammy, you want to get verse 10?
Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you, with Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, about whom you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him.
I guess that answers my question. My point. Aristarchus was the prisoner here as well. It seemed he is a fellow prisoner with Paul in Rome. Colossians is written. Well, Paul is in Rome. Henry, you want to get Philemon, verse 24.
And so to Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, Luke, my fellow workers.
So we find here again that we have Aristarchus here, and Philemon is another book that is written from Rome. Who else is on this trip, even though he's not mentioned? Luke. We. To determine that we should sail. Well, Luke is here. Luke is among those who are going to Rome. Makes sense as to why he's mentioned then in Philemon, a letter written from Rome. So the ship stopped in Sidon, sailed north of Cyprus, and came to Myra, a city in Lycia, which is in south-central Turkey. From there, let's read verses 6 through 13, and we'll start with Bill, 2 verses each, 6 through 13.
Then the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing to Italy, and he put us on board. When we had sailed slowly many days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, the wind not permitting us to proceed, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salome.
Passing it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lasea. Now, when much time had been spent and sailing was now dangerous because the fast was already over, Paul advised them.
Verse 10, Henry.
Seeing men, I perceive that this world will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also our lives.
One more verse.
And nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul.
2 more verses, Bill, 12 and 13.
And because the harbor was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also. If by any means they could reach Phoenix, the harbor of Crete, opening toward the southwest and northwest, and winter there. And the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire. Putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete.
So again, now we have our, I forgot to flip it. I forgot. I had it on 2 slides. So we are now in Myra. It says we sailed over here to Cnidus, which is over in this little corner over here. And from there, like as far as remember, this ship is a ship carrying cargo. It's going to be stopping in different places, letting go of cargo, picking up new cargo, and it's carrying prisoners as well. And then they sailed south to the city of Salmone in Crete. And they came to a place called Lacia and then Fair Havens. Or say they wanted to get, they finally came to Fair Havens. What time of the year is this now?
It must be fall. They get close to winter.
They're getting close to winter. If you've never been on the Mediterranean Sea, and I haven't either, but I've heard stories, it's not a very calm sea at the best of times. And in the winter, it can get downright dangerous. If you remember, there was that cruise ship a few years back that was on the Mediterranean Sea and it crashed into the rocks. The captain didn't pay attention that well and lost control of the ship, and it crashed into some rocks on the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean in winter is not a place to sail. Even today, it's not a very nice place to sail. They wanted to get to Phoenix, which is a better city than where they were at. It's a better city. Phoenix is over here. And they wanted to winter there, in Phoenix. So then, what did Paul warn them against?
Disaster.
He warned them of disaster. Remember, Paul had traveled these seas. He had traveled all the way around here throughout his entire missionary career, if you want to say, his preaching career. He had traveled the Aegean Sea. He had traveled through around here. He had traveled this many times. He knew exactly what they were going to be facing. Did the captain listen? No. Captain what? The captain wanted what the captain wanted. And the centurion and the captain wanted to get to Phoenix. It was a better port. And they probably thought, it's not that far. How often have we done that? Where we're driving someplace, and it's not that far. We're only an hour and a half away. Now it's going to be farther than that for them, but I mean, we're only an hour and a half away, and then you go and you get into terrible weather that you didn't know was going to be there. Well, they had a soft wind, and so they set sail. In other words, they looked out and said, wow, it's not that bad of weather. Maybe we can beat it. Well, that's not going to be the case. Verses 14 through 26, and this time I'll try to remember to flip the slide. Acts 27, verses 14 through 26. We'll read 4 verses each, and we'll start with, who will we start with? I'll start with Tammy. I forget where we ended.
But not long after, a tempestuous headwind arose, called Euroclydon. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive, and running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship, and fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail, and so were driven.
Since we were violently storm-tossed, it began the next day to jettison the cargo, and on the third day they soon received cargo overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, above our being saved was heaven. last chapter. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me, and not have set sail from the Crete and incurred this injury and loss."
Yet now I urge you to take heart. There will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of God, to whom I belong, and whom I worship. And he said, "Do not be afraid, Paul, you must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all, those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God, that it will be exactly as I have been told, but we must run aground on some island."
So what did they run into here on the sea?
Wild weather.
Wild weather, and it's in the ESV it's called a northeastern wind. It's called something else in Tammy's version and almost every other version.
Euroclydon.
Yeah, Euroclydon or Euclidean. It's a specific type of wind. We sometimes will say, well, it's a nor'easter, or it's there's other types of winds. We give names to these winds, and this is a very common wind pattern on the Mediterranean. And what did they do when they were afraid of running aground?
Like to the boat, you mean?
Yeah.
They cabled her up, ran cables around the boat.
Okay, and then after that, to sort of make it easier to maneuver the ship,
They let the wind.
got the wind driver, and after that, started throwing things overboard. Started lightening the ship. It's easier to control a ship if you don't have all of this heavy gear weighting you down. And so they started throwing the freight overboard. And after several days, remember, they're lost out here someplace. They're lost out here. They don't know where they are. There's no stars in the sky. You navigate by the moon and the stars. We do the same thing today. A lot of airplane accidents, if they happen at night, usually happen in storms and on nights with no moon. Because at night you can't see the horizon. You can't navigate. You get spatially disoriented. You have no direction where you're going. Well, with no stars to navigate, they didn't know, were they up here, going towards these islands? Were they going towards Corinth, like as far as the Achaean islands? Were they going towards Africa down here? They didn't know. There were no stars for them to navigate. So they were out here someplace, and they were wandering around, and they lost hope of living. Paul gets up, as Paul often does. Should have listened to me. I knew what I was talking about. But what hope does he give them?
Well, he tells them his God will save them. The ship will be lost. But
Yeah. He's going to tell them all is not lost. We're going to lose the ship, but we're not going to die. There's not going to be one person who dies. An angel told them we weren't going to die. They'll be cast on an island. Because remember what Jesus had said to Paul way back when he was in jail. Tammy, you want to get Acts 23:11.
The following night the Lord stood by him and said, "Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome."
Jesus made this prophecy. He wasn't going to let Paul die. Didn't mean he was going to make Paul's life easy, but he wasn't going to let Paul die. And so Paul told the men, we're going to lose the ship, but we're not going to die. Now, to people who don't worship the God that Paul worships, probably sounds like hollow words. Wishful thinking. But later on, when they don't die, you would think maybe they'll recognize something. Let's get 27 to 32 to start with. The ship is now coming near some land. And we'll start with Henry and read 2 verses each.
Now, when the 14th night had come, as we were being driven across the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land, so they took us sounding and found 20 fathoms, and later further, they took us sounding again and found 15 fathoms.
Then fearing lest we should run aground on the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. And as the sailors were seeking to escape from the ship, when they had let down the skiff into the sea, under pretense of putting out anchors from the prow,
Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the skiff and let it fall off.
Okay, so we're out in the middle of the sea. How did they know they were getting close to land? It was night. They couldn't see. How did they know they were getting close to land?
They sensed it first.
Well, they sensed it. And then what did they do?
Took soundings.
Took soundings. In other words, they were taking measurements of, I'm not a sailor by any means, but you can test how far you are from land by different ways. And they were taking soundings, and they were getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so they're getting closer and closer to land. When they can't see it, they were praying for day to come. Because at least if it was day, they'd be able to see it. They don't know how close they are to the land. They don't know if they're going to run ashore on the beach, crash the boat. They don't know where it is. What were the men going to be doing? The sailors?
they were seeking to escape it.
Yeah.
Let down their skiffs.
They let down what we call the lifeboats. And they were going to sneak off under the pretense of throwing down anchors. And so they were wanting to save themselves. Paul told the centurion, and they cut the ropes so they couldn't escape. Because Paul said they're not going to be saved if they're not in the boat. Because again, they don't know where land is. They could be still up somewhere here, and it's a long way to land, and they can't swim. They still don't know where the land is. They could swim the wrong way. Paul said they're not going to be saved if they're not in the boat. And so they cut the ropes, and everyone was in the boat. Now let's get verses 33 to 38. And we'll start with Henry again, 2 verses each.
As day was about to dawn, Paul urged them out to take some food, saying, "Today is the 40th day that you have continued in suspense and without food, having taken nothing. Therefore I urge you to take some food. It will give you strength, but not appear is to perish from the hand of enemies."
And when he had said these things, he took bread, gave thanks to God in the presence of them all. And when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then they were all encouraged, and also took food themselves.
And in all we were 276 persons on the ship. So when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and threw out the wheat into the sea.
So remember, they'd already lightened the ship earlier. They'd obviously kept food, but they didn't eat. They hadn't eaten in 2 weeks. I don't like it when I don't eat in a day, let alone 2 weeks. I don't know what I'd be like. I'd probably be pretty cranky by 2 weeks without eating. And pretty weak as well. And remember, they're sailors. This is not a motorized ship, a steam ship. Sailing is hard work to get the masts and the sails in the right direction, to throw those anchors overboard. Those things aren't light; they're heavy. And Paul said, "You need to eat. is the 14th day you've not eaten. So he said, you need to eat. You won't die. You need to eat. And so he took the bread. He gave thanks. Again, Paul thanked God for the food that they had. And then he began to eat. And Paul's eating, I'm going to eat. It's just like any other time. Well, Paul's going to do it. If he's going to have food, I'm going to have food. And we find that there's a lot of people on this ship. 276 people on this ship. This is not a boat, a small boat. This is a large ship. 276 people on the ship. They all ate. They all ate enough to not be hungry anymore. And so then they lightened the ship the rest of the way. They weren't going to... they were going to try to lighten the ship as much as they can. It's easier to stop. If they're getting close to land, they need to stop. The heavier they are, the longer it takes to stop. Same with an airplane. If you have heavy loads, it's going to take a long time to stop. So the last 5 verses of this chapter, 39 to 44. We're back to Henry, I think, again. We'll do 1 verse each.
Now when the worst day did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on which the land is possible to run the ship ashore.
And they let go the anchors and left them in the sea. Meanwhile, loosing the rudder ropes, and they hoisted the mainsail to the wind and made for shore.
But striking a place where 2 seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern was being broken up by the violence of the waves.
And so the plan was to kill the prisoners. That's the only issue, to swim away and escape.
But the centurion, wanting to save Paul, kept them from their purpose, and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land.
And the rest, some on boards and some on parts of the ship. And so it was that they all escaped safely to the land.
Okay, so they have no idea where they are. They have no idea. Now we do know that they are all the way over here in the island of Malta. They're not going to discover that till we get to chapter 28, verse 1. They don't know where they are. They could be anywhere. They could be up here in Greece. They could be down here in Libya. They could be, who knows, they could be all the way to Sicily. They don't know where they are. They know they have come to ground. Now they were wanting to get to the land. But what happened when they were trying to get to the land? On the ship.
Soldier wanted to kill the prisoners.
Well, that was before. What happened to the ship before they got to the land?
They ran aground.
They ran aground. Now they were wanting to get to the actual island. They didn't want to break the ship apart. It's an expensive ship, and they didn't want to have to swim. But they hit a reef. As is often the case as you get closer to land, if you go out east, you know that you'll see the water, but the continent goes out farther than the water that than the land that we see. And it's not ocean there. And islands are the same way. They jut out, but the water covers parts of the land that we can't see. And since we can't see them, our ships are in danger if we don't have maps to say, okay, you can't sail here. And so they hit a reef, destroyed the ship. And so now they're all, most of them anyway, are in the water. Now, soldiers want to kill the prisoners. Remember, soldiers were responsible for missing prisoners who reached shore and escaped. This is now a problem for the soldiers. They didn't really care. They didn't really care if they could get to shore and keep them. But if they drowned, they'd have a problem. If their body was washed away, they'd have a problem. And if they went missing in any way, they'd have a problem. They weren't even really allowed to have them die, and the soldiers could have been executed. So let's get Acts 12. We'll get 5, 7, 11, 18, and 19. And we'll start with Henry again.
So Peter was kept in prison, but the earnest prayer from him was made to God by the church.
And behold, an angel of the Lord stood next to him, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him, saying, "Get up quickly." And the chains fell off his hands.
And when Peter had come to himself, he said, "Now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me from the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the Jewish people."
Now when they came, there was no manner disturbance among the soldiers who what had become of Peter. And after Herod searched for him and did not find him, they examined the centuries and ordered that they should be put to death. Then they went down from Judea to Caesarea and spent time there.
This is what happened to soldiers who lost prisoners. You died. And so that's why they wanted to kill all the prisoners. Now the centurion, he wants to save Paul, and he forbids this. He says, no, we'll take the chance. We're not going to kill anyone. So they grabbed anything that they could find that floated and basically surfed to shore. They tried to get in. It's a long swim, so they tried to get safely to shore. They all made it safely to shore. Remember, the angel of the Lord said they all would live. Believe in God. Have faith in God. Paul did. Paul had faith that God would save him. God had promised him he would get to Rome. So Paul had faith. Paul trusted in God. These men did not, but they still were saved. And so next week, then, the Lord willing, we will take up with the last chapter of the book of Acts, which means we'll probably get through the last chapter. There's a lot, we may not. There's a lot in this chapter when it comes to when Paul gets to Rome. The first half of the chapter might go quickly, and the last half of the chapter might be a little slower. But we'll see where we get to, Lord willing, next week. They're going to find out where they are, because they still don't know where they are. And remember, now it's winter. Now we're going to have a wait before they can start to sail again.